Today we're bringing a vintage watch back to life. This piece dates to about 1940s or 50s, and it belonged to a family and that spent most of its life in Montreal. The previous owner was apparently someone very well off and deeply interested in design. And honestly, when you look at the watch, that actually makes sense. Elegant proportions, classic layout, clean typography. But today, this watch is not working, so it is our job to make sure that it runs. A little sneak peek, we are successful. We can and we are going to make it run. So the goal is simple. Take it apart, clean it, restore it, and bring it back to life. Hi, I'm Dennis, and this is Wheels and Watches DIY. On this channel, I restore watches, I learn watchmaking skills, and sometimes I make a few mistakes along the way. So today we're doing a full restoration on this vintage Wittnauer. It's actually Wittnauer Longines. If you open up the case and you look on the inside, that's what it's stamped. The watch is absolutely beautiful. When I looked at it in person, it's on the smaller side. It's maybe about 25 millimeters across and maybe 31 millimeters from top to bottom, from lug to lug. The crystal is original, and to me, the watch looks original. The date came from the factory. So my favorite thing to do is to open up the back case. And honestly, if you're into tinkering with watches, that's what's exciting. Looking at the movement, looking at the challenges ahead, that's what drives you forward. Now, I'm going to check for function once I take it out and proceed with disassembly. So from what I've been told, this watch dates from around 1940s or 50s. And this is a very fascinating time period just because the World War II was over and everything was transitioning from wartime production back to civilian. So mechanical watches were becoming everyday tools for professionals like engineers, architects, doctors, and businessmen. So owning a good mechanical watch was both practical and a symbol of taste. So here you could see me taking off the hands, and I had to take extra care to get the hands off because I have no way to replace the parts, especially this little small hand. So I really had to be careful getting underneath that little hand and gently prying it up. Not gonna lie, this moment made me sweat a little bit. Now let's look in the back. We're gonna start this assembly process. Interestingly enough, I purchased another watch from the same seller. And that second watch also was in the family, and that one I'll probably restore at some other time. And that one was a woman's pendant watch. So we're gonna save that for another video. All right, so let's move on forward. So before disassembling the watch, I always check the dial, check the hands, look at the crystal, and most importantly, I look if the movement runs. In this case, the bits were all there, but the watch was not running. So I figured it was just really dirty. The lubricants were dry, so it needed to be taken apart, cleaned, and then put back together. So something that I've done differently in this video, I try to keep all the parts together so I don't mix up the screws, and I try to film everything in the process. So here we're taking out a little spring. Here we go. Now it is used for that little click to hold the ratchet wheel so it doesn't spin back. Oh boy, now you could clearly see that there's a bunch of rust, and you can actually see a lot of rust in those photos that I installed or put in the video a little bit before. We're taking off that little bridge that goes over the barrel, and that thing was rusty, so we had to do some rust removal. Taking off the bridge and taking off the train of wheels, we inspect everything and it looks pretty decent. So there was a few moments in this restoration that gave me a little bit of a panic, made me sweat a little bit, but in the end, I think it worked out okay. I did have to reassemble this watch a few times because it wasn't running the way I wanted to, so I had to do some extra work on the balance and the balance jewels. The way this this watch is designed, it's kind of old school. So the balance cock needs to be disassembled in order to get to the jewels, in order to clean them and lubricate them, and you have to put it back together afterwards. So that actually requires you to completely disassemble the balance, which was tricky, and that made me sweat. And then on the other side, on the plate, you had a little gate that was over a jewel, and that little gate was holding the cap jewel in it. I've never encountered the design before, but apparently it was fairly common. And here are those parts. By the way, I do lose one part during the process right there. You could see that circle. So this piece was part of the keyless works, and I guess I lost it somewhere during the cleaning process, and for the life of me, I couldn't find it. So I had to manufacture that piece from the things that I had on hand. Luckily, I had some watchmaker's wire that's hard enough that I could use it, and I had to use my staking set to secure it. And this solution here, by the way, this is my rust removing solution. What I'm not going to show is the time that it soaks. So I had to let it soak for a while and scrub it and let it soak more because the rust was just horrendous. I don't think I've worked on a rusty watch before. It's possible that you may see more rust. But for me, this was the first, and I wasn't really sure if it's going to work, but it did. One mistake that I did make, I didn't rinse it well enough. So if you are using a rust removing solution, just make sure that you rinse it. So moving on, now you could see me cleaning the case. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. The process is the same as before. I use a bit of pegwood. The crystal is out, by the way. I use a bit of pegwood and brushes to get all the crud out before everything else is clean. So here is the plate after I rinsed it, and now we're proceeding to putting everything back together. So the balance is installed. I put it into one dip solution, and that product is specifically designed to clean the balance chemically. From what I have read, you don't really put balance in any harsh solutions or an IPA for long periods of time. You can ruin it, so I'm just doing as I'm told, essentially, and it worked out okay. So now we're proceeding to installing the parts for the keyless works, and this is a little lever that I had to make. So you can see there a little piece of wire that I had to size and secure and polish. That took me a while. This was my first time manufacturing a piece for a vintage watch, and honestly, I am very happy with the result. That little lever was secure at the end, and it worked like a charm. That little lever is secured by a couple of screws that you'll see me installing. By the way, because the keyless work is metal on metal, I typically use special grease just to minimize any wear and tear. There they are. So now we're proceeding with installing Oh, I think I made a mistake there. I think I installed the spring the wrong way, so I'm just disassembling the little bridge that goes over some intermediary wheels, and then I'm flipping that little spring back and putting everything back together, making sure everything is smooth and it's running. So in watchmaking, even small mistakes can cost you a lot. But if you're learning, remember this. Take your time, be patient, and expect things to go wrong, occasionally, of course. If you follow those guides, chances are you'll be fine. And here we are reassembling the keyless works. That took me a little time, but it wasn't too difficult. And you could see me wearing my finger cots. I really tried on this watch not to touch anything with my bare hands after it was cleaned. The less oil from your hands goes on to the watch parts, the better. By the way, the stem is held by a stem retaining screw. It's not a push pin, unlike some other watches. In this case, it's a screw. You loosen it up and the stem simply comes out. So as long as you know that, you'll be okay. So now the stem is in. Everything is lubricated. And then we're going to test it out. And it seems like everything's clicking over. It moves. All right. Here we are. And you can see right there, the plate came out really nice. After all that scrubbing, after all the cleaning, everything came out maybe not perfect, but much, much better compared to what it looked like before. Here we are. The train of wheels has been assembled, and you just saw me spinning the wheels, and they should run freely. If there is resistance, that means something's not right. So take the bridge off, make sure everything's aligned, and put it back together. And this is the part I was telling you about. So this is the dial side. You could see the little hatch that I'm cleaning, and that little hatch has a little cap jewel in it. So what I'm doing is I'm using, it's a buffing stick essentially with a piece of leather on the bottom, and I put a little bit of IPA on my watchmaker's paper, and I cleaned that up. I polished it up, put some lubrication on the cap jewel, and I installed it. There is a little tiny screw that is holding that hatch in place, so just make sure you don't lose it. It's probably one of the smallest screws besides 2 screws in the balance cock in the whole watch. So I really had to take my time and make sure that I don't lose it and I don't break them. Now we just install the bridge that goes over the mainspring, and we're going to install the ratchet wheel and everything else that comes with it. You will notice another mistake in just a moment. You will notice it when I try to wind the watch, and you'll see a little wobble there. By the way, this is a reverse threaded screw indicated by a few lines on it. So instead of righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, it actually goes the other way around. So here we're testing it, and it seems okay, but in reality, it is not. I'll have to disassemble this part a couple of times. One mistake that I made was the little spring that goes into the click. It went the opposite way, so I had to take it apart and flip it the other way around. Second thing, I forgot a little wheel that goes under the other gear, and you'll see that by, oh, here we go. Here's that little spring that I was telling you about. It's a bit of a pain, but that's okay. And you could see, oh, here we go. So I had to use my, by the way, I had to use my Dumont number 7s. These are tweezers with the tips pointing down. Some people use it for hairspring work, which works really well, by the way. But here I use the tips to move that little lever, that little spring out, and then I installed the click spring, and then I put it all back together, only to find out that there's a wheel that's missing. Let's see if we can catch that. All right, so let's tighten everything down. And you could see that little wobble there. There's my mistake. So something's not quite right. My first thought is to check the screws and everything was tight. And then I look at my parts tray and I realize I forgot a little wheel that goes under that little part. So make sure that you don't have extra parts at the end of your day. And if you do, try to figure out where it came from. And that is exactly why in this particular instance, I labeled everything, what parts were from where, how many screws, and so on. So after I install that little missing piece and lubricate everything, put it all back together, lo and behold, the wobble is gone. So we have the right parts, they are working correctly, and they're nicely lubricated. So it was a lot smoother compared to what we started with. And because this is metal on metal action, I use grease. Here we go, that wheel goes on. The teeth have to mesh with the ratchet wheel. And again, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, backwards, just because it's a reverse threaded screw. So let's see. Let's test it out. The train of wheels is running, and it's running beautifully. And I don't know if you caught that, there was another mistake there. And that mistake was not installing the pallet fork when the bridge for the wheel train was off. And I'm going to have a heck of a time trying to fit that sucker in. At the end, I have to take that bridge off to gain access. So I think that's what I'm doing there. I'm taking all the parts that I just put on back into the parts tray in order to expose the extra space I need to install the pallet fork, the little bridge that goes over the pallet fork, and the screw that holds everything together. So the pallet fork is tricky. It is super tiny. The pivots are ridiculously small, and it is really easy to damage them or lose it. So please take extra care not to lose it. Again, just like the balance spring, I have to clean it in hair dip. And that's basically hexane. That does not interfere with the shellac that holds those pallet stones within the pallet fork. And I think we're successful there. Now here you could see me using a little screwdriver, just prying that little bridge and exposing the train of wheels. Another note on installing the pallet fork. When you install the pallet fork, when you install the bridge and you are 100% sure that everything's in properly, all the pivots are in, the pallet fork is moving from side to side. When you give your watch a little bit of a wind and you gently flick that pallet fork from side to side, it's gonna have a bit of a snap. If you see that, that's a good sign. That's a sign that you can proceed forward. If you don't see that, something is not right. So take a step back, make sure that everything has enough clearance, everything is seated. If you fail to do that, chances are you'll break something and you'll need to replace parts. Okay, so now that it is in, I am playing with a train of wheels again. trying to put that pilot fork bridge in. Now, mistake number 2. Somehow, and I don't know how, I accidentally installed the pallet fork the wrong side up. So I had to go back, disassemble everything, flip it over to the right side, secure the pallet fork bridge, install the train of wheels, install the bridge that goes over the train of wheels, and make sure that nothing's pinching and everything's moving. After that was done, I put the bridge that went over the mainspring, installed the click spring and an intermediate wheel with all the springs and everything else, and now we're installing the balance. And you can see there it wants to run. It wants to run a little bit, and eventually it does. And I would have to say this is another one of my favorite parts of restoration, just to see that balance move. That means what you've done was correct. You didn't break anything, and this thing is back to life. You can see the amplitude is not the greatest, and that brings us to another problem. The problem was the balance. Now, you saw in the beginning of the video that the watch was running at the end, and that is true, but it wasn't running well, and then I had to leave it like that for some reasons that I will explain later. And this was the first time I had to disassemble and reassemble the balance complete. I haven't worked on this particular style of balance complete. The balance cock needs to be taken apart in order to get to the jewel where the pivots of the balance wheel sit. That's on the balance cock itself, and then on the main plate, the little hatch that has the cap jewel, that is on the bottom of that balance. So absolute pain. I do not like the design. I much prefer the die shock springs. Even though they're springing, they're also a pain, but they're much less of a pain compared to this setup. On top of all of that, the balance itself, the hairspring was a little bent, so it was catching. So on top of everything else, and disassembling the balance cock a few times, I had to work some magic on the spring. I had to use my Dumont number 7 to change the bends on that spring so nothing was touching. And let me tell you, that took me forever, and it's absolute pain. I'm not showing that footage because there's no point. I'll just say it was a pain, it's done, it works, and we're moving on. Now here, after everything was completed, I put the balance wheel with the balance spring into hair dip or one dip just to chemically clean it. I didn't want any debris, anything on it. And then we're gonna put everything else back together. So the wheel with the spring goes onto the actual balance cock and it is secured. Now I did have to play with the collet a little bit. And was it successful? Yes and no. Initially it was running with really minimal beat error, but as I had to reassemble and disassemble this thing a few times, the beat error went up. I think I ended up with something like a 2.5 milliseconds, which was not great, but I guess it's acceptable in my books because I didn't want to take more risk. So this was before all the problems and disassemblies. And then after, you'll see it was running at a bit of a lower amplitude and with more beat error. Okay, so moving on to the next step. We are working, what are we working on? We are working on the dial side. We're making sure that the cannon pinion is getting installed. And by the way, these are bat tweezers. I do not use my good Dumont tweezers for this purpose. They're too nice and too expensive to mess up. So I use a really cheap pair for that, and I make sure that the canyon pinion is lubricated. The intermediate wheels are in and also lubricated. And then now installing the minute wheel. All right, so we are ready to install the dial and the hands. By the way, this particular watch has balance screws. They're kind of on opposite ends. Unfortunately, only one of those balance screws was good. I was able to secure the dial with only one of them. It is what it is. The other one, the head of the screw was broken and it wasn't able to move in or out, so I left it. I didn't have any tools to extract the screws, so I left it as is. Now the dial is in, and at some point I think I use a special brush just to buff up the numbers. But before we get to that, we're gonna install the hands. So I always start with the hour hand, obviously, and then what I like to do is I like to line it up to midnight. For some reason, it just makes sense to me. It's especially helpful if you have a complication like date. The date needs to be correct. So if it's a watch where the date flicks over right at midnight, make sure that it does so before you install the hour hand. Otherwise, your watch will not show the right stuff. It'll be off. So to install the hands, in this particular case, I used both my tool that I acquired recently, as well as manual setting hand tools. Now I'm checking the clearance. I install the minute hand in the same way, making sure that they are not touching one another, and then we proceed to installing the seconds hand. And it was a pain, not going to lie. That second hand was so tiny and so fragile, I was probably a little nervous to install it. But again, take your time, line everything up, and make sure that everything lines up properly before you have it completely seated. Otherwise, you will bend something, you will break something, and then you're out of parts and you have to source more parts, which takes both time and money. So now that the hands are on, I've cased the movement. It's all back together. And then I install the leather strap and just kind of look it over one more time. So were we successful in bringing this thing back to life? I think we were. I did learn a lot from this project. From before, when it was not running, it now runs, which is a positive. Does it run well? It does not. I did not have the tools to make sure that the balance is true, or enough magnification to check if the pivots are off. So I left it as is. Did I make some mistakes along the line? Yes, I did. I had to reassemble and disassemble a few times, but it worked out okay. I lost one part, which was in the keyless work, but we made another one and it worked out. I had to play with some wheels and some parts that were kind of left behind, and that's okay. And then what I didn't show is I didn't show the restoration of the crystal. The same rules apply. A few passes with different grits of sandpaper and finished with Polywatch brought it back to life, maybe 80%. Is it perfect? No. I wasn't able to take the deep scratches out. But for the purpose of this restoration, keeping everything as original and as authentic as it possibly can be done, I think we've done well. What else was there? So all in all, fun project. Definitely learned a lot. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. If you enjoyed this restoration, please consider subscribing to the channel. We'll be restoring more watches in the future, including that pendant watch from the same seller, and I'm looking forward to tearing that one apart. Thank you for watching. Again, my name is Dennis, and this was Wheels and Watches DIY, and we'll see you in the next restoration. Take care.